Chapter 12 The Time Trap. The ship hangs above the leaden sea, safe from attack while the four talk. Murdoch and Mason plan. Murdoch's tattered leather uniform is hanging in rags. His hawk face is gaunt and tired, his red hair dark with grime. But Eric seems unchanged. His pale eyes watch coldly above the beak of a nose. The thin lips are grim as ever. What I can't understand, Mason observes, is how I got from Arabia, Albuquerque, to South America, a continent on the other side of the globe. I was moving in time, not space. Globe, murmured Eliza, puzzled. Surely the earth is flat, surrounded by an abyss. Murdoch says, you traveled in space, too. In 1,000,000 years or more or less, the world travels with the sun naturally along its orbit. But the gravitational drag keeps the ship bound to Earth, which is lucky, or we might find ourselves in space, light years from any solar system. The ship's bound, but not too tightly. The Earth revolves, the time ship lags, and so you find yourself once again in Albuquerque, once again in, what did you say, South America, and here. But all three places are near the equator. He turns to pages of calculations. I've located Greater Clawn, I think, but nothing certain. We can't stay here, though, or we'll starve to death soon enough. Shall we? He reads the answer in the other's eyes. Without speaking, he sends the ship into time. The light fails and grows again. They hang above a craggy mountain range, gigantic, towering to the sky. The sun is warmer, closer, and larger. Earth is green again, lacking the dead, leaden grimeness of the ultimate future. This is before my own time and after yours, Mason, Murdoch says, about 2150. 2150 A.D. That was Nervor's time sector, Mason says, remembering the words of the Silver Priestess. He goes on as sudden thought comes to him. Hadn't we better find weapons first? In my time, I can dig up a few machine guns, bombs. You probably have better ones in your time, Murdoch. The other looks at him oddly, a curious expression in his eyes. My time? I do not wish to return to it. Not yet, at least. As for weapons, the Master will not be expecting us, and we can perhaps find arms on the way. The needle points to the east, and we must go there. We'll watch as we travel. Mason is not satisfied, but says no more. He scans the barren mountains and plains, the teeming jungles, the lakes, broad seas over which they fly. Once he sees a gleaming globe on a mountain top and points it out to Murdoch. The other brings the ship down. A transparent globe, miles in diameter, hanging in empty air. Within it, as they hover, Mason can see unfamiliar-looking machines, rows upon rows of long cylinders of glass. Within the cylinders are human beings, men and women, dead or asleep. Murdoch lands the ship, and they try to find some way of entering the giant globe, but in vain. There is no openings, and the transparent substance is steel hard. We have a legend of this, Murdoch says. In the days of beast rule, ages ago, when experimenters sought to create human beings out of animals, mankind foresaw some danger, a temporary waning of the solar rays, I think. They built huge spheres and sealed themselves within, throwing themselves into suspended animation for years. A few scientists tried to adapt themselves to the changing radiation and spent their time making beasts into men, having some thoughts of creating an empire of their own to defeat the sleepers when they awakened, but they failed. We can't get weapons here, Mason grunts. That's sure, anyway. There were some weapons these last scientists perfected. It was lost, forgotten. Only its power is remembered. No shield could bar it. If we can find the weapon and use it against Greater Clawn. You need such magic to battle the Master, says Eric. My scimitar would fail, I know that. The ship rises and drifts on. A jungle slips beneath. Far away, steadily growing nearer, is a city, and Mason catches his breath at its heartbreaking beauty. Not Rome or Babylon nor Capri has ever had the delicate, poignant splendor of this strange metropolis, hidden in the jungle, crumbling and cracked with age at closer view, but still a matchless jewel of architecture. A rose-red city, half as old as time, Mason quotes softly, half to himself. The ship drives down. There is furtive movement in the jungle metropolis, not human movement. Animals scurry from sight. A leopard lopes swiftly away. Birds fly startled. Greater Clawn is close, Murdoch whispers. My instruments show that. The ship lands in a marble street. Hesitating, Mason opens the port, steps out. Nothing happens. The still, humid air is utterly silent. Far away, a beast cries, lonely and strangely poignant. In the distance, Mason sees a human figure. It comes slowly forward with a shambling, dragging gait. A man, a real old man. An Oriental, Mason guesses, noting the distinctive shape of the eyes and the facial contours and the hue of the skin. The oldster's face is withered, shrunken, and dry as a walnut. Sparse white hairs patch the skull. The thin lips move endlessly, whispering. Filmed eyes dwell unseeingly on Mason and the others. But the man halts, and a new look comes into his face. He speaks louder in a language Mason thinks he recognizes. It is Chinese, but oddly changed, with a different stress and accent. Yet if Chinese had persisted for so many centuries, there was no reason why it should not exist in 2150 AD. 200 years would make little difference. The Chinese says, "The sleepers have awakened then." Guessing at his meaning, Mason replies carefully, "We are not sleepers. We come from another time, another age." The man closes his eyes, tears trickling from the wrinkled lids. "I thought I had been forgiven. Ah, we have been punished indeed." "Punished?" "When the sleepers went to their globes of refuge, we refused to join them. We thought to build a kingdom of beast men. We reared cities for them, took possession of those already existing. We raised up the beasts, but that was long ago. Only a few are left now. They warred upon one another and slew and were slain. So now I, Li Keng, live alone in Koh-i-Noor, since Nervor went across the desert with her leopards." Murdoch catches the familiar names. "Nervor?" he breaks in. "Ask him more of this, Mason. Is she here? What does he say?" "I have met Nervor," Mason says in Chinese. "She is alive, I think. You are her friend?" Li Keng does not reply. Into his eyes creeps a dull gaze. His lips twitch and writhe. He mumbles wordlessly. Suddenly he breaks into a maniacal cackle of laughter. A chill shakes Mason. The oldster's mad. Li Keng sobers. He runs skeletal fingers through his thin hair. "I am alone," he murmurs. "Have the sleepers forgiven? Did they send you?" "We are from another time," Mason says again, striving to pierce the mists about the dulled brain. "The sleepers? Have they forgiven?" But Li Keng has lost interest. His low, insane laughter rings out again. Apparently, the man knows nothing of Nervor or Grettir Klon, though Mason cannot be sure. He touches the Chinese's shoulder. "Is there food here? We are hungry." "Eh? There is fruit in the forest and good water." "Ask him of the weapons," Murdoch whispers. "Ask him." Mason obeys. Li Keng peers through rheumy eyes. "Ah, yes, the invincible power. But it is forbidden. Forbidden." He turns to go. Mason steps forward, gripping the oldster's arm gently. The other tries feebly to disengage it. "We mean you no harm," Mason explains, "but we need your help. This invincible power." "You are from the sleepers, then? They have forgiven?" Mason hesitates. Then he slowly says, "The sleepers sent us to you. They have forgiven." Would the ruse work? Will the crazed brain respond? Li Keng stares, his lips working nervously. A thin hand plucks at scant hair. "This is true? They will let me enter a globe of refuge?" "Yes, but you betrayed them before, so they demand that you prove your faith." The Chinese shakes his head. They... You must give them the invincible weapon as proof that you will not betray them again." Li Keng does not answer for a long moment. Then he nods. "Yes, you shall have it. Come." He lifts a hand as Mason beckons to the others. "They may not come." "Why not?" The other's voice is suspicious. "There are only 2 suits of protective armor. The radium rays would kill you unless these are worn. We must go down into the radioactive caverns beneath Koh-i-Noor." Li Keng pauses and a dull glaze creeps over his eyes. Swiftly Mason translates. "I don't dare cross him now. Might set him off his head entirely. You 3 stay with the ship. Guard it until I get back with the weapon." "But Kent," Elisa's face is worried. "There may be danger." "Not from Li Keng, at least," Mason smiles. "I can look out for myself. Even if I were sure there's danger, I'd have to go. Until we get the weapon, we're unarmed." "Let him go," Murdoch says quietly. Eric says nothing, but his brown hand tightens on his scimitar hilt. Let us start, Li Kang, Mason tells the old Chinese and follows the others along the deserted marble street. Presently, Li Kang turns into a half-ruined building, passing between sagging gates of bronze, curiously carved. He halts in the portal. You must wait, he says. Only worshippers of Selene and the condemned may enter here. I must tell the goddess of my plans. Before Mason can reply, he slips through an inner door and is gone. Whispering an oath, Mason takes a stride forward and halts. He peers through the narrow crack left by the half-closed panel. He sees a huge, dim chamber, cryptic with gloom, and towering at the further end, a monstrous female statue. Li Kang moves across the floor, and as Mason watches, he drops to his hands and knees, supplicating himself before the idol. Well, there is nothing to fear from a goddess of stone or metal. Grinning crookedly, Mason draws back and catches his breath as he hears a tumult from outside, an angry shout. With a leap, Mason reaches the bronze door. As he peers out, his stomach moves sickeningly at the sight before him. Dozens of malformed half-human figures fill the marble street. They mail uncertainly about the time ship, and in their midst are two bound, prostrate figures, Eliza and Murdoch. Coming towards Mason is Gredor Klon. The master, moving forward with quick, hurried steps, points to jaw set, eyes cold and deadly. Behind him comes more of the strange creatures, being more bestial than human, Mason senses. He remembers the weird science that has changed animals to men, and guesses that the malformed, hairy, brute-faced monsters are products of an eerie experiment. Simultaneously, Mason knows what he must do. He sees Eric, scimitar red and lifted, running forward. The Sumerian roars a battle cry. He springs at the master and sets himself for a stroke that, for all its force, does not penetrate the shielding atomic mesh. Mason charges out through the bronze gates. He catches a glimpse of Gredor Klon whirling, involuntarily shrinking under the Sumerian's blow, lifting a metal tube in a tiny hand. Mason's shoulder hits Eric, sends the giant driving aside. He flings himself on the Sumerian, striving to wrench the scimitar free, reading stark amazement in the other's pale eyes. Amazement and anger, red rage that surges through Eric's veins and gives him the strength enough to throw Mason down with ease. But the beast men by now have surrounded the two. Mason feels rough hands seize him. He makes no resistance. Quietly he stands up and lets the beast men drag him towards Gredor Klon. Eric is still battling furiously, but without his scimitar he is handicapped. He goes down at last, still struggling. His captors truss him up with thongs. The master's cold eyes are probing. The shrill voice says, "Is Eric then your enemy, Mason?" Yes, the archaeologist is playing for time. He has acted on impulse, knowing instinctively the best plan, but now he needs a chance to scrutinize his cards, to see which ones to play. He says, "Can we talk alone, Gredor Klon?" He nods towards Eric. For a long moment the other does not reply. Then he calls a command, and the two of the beast men pull Mason towards a nearby doorway. The master follows. Inside the building, in a fungus-grown, ill-smelling little room, Gredor Klon sits cross-legged on the floor. He signals for the beast men to release their captive. "Thanks," Mason grunts. "There's a lot to explain. I don't know if I'd ever found you." "And now that you have, what?" "Well, I still want to hold you to your bargain." The other shrugs narrow shoulders. "Return you to your own time sector?" "Something more now," Mason says quietly. "After you left Albuquerque, Eric asked me to help him release Eliza and Murdoch. I did. Murdoch explains your plans and intends to conquer a civilization and rule. My own civilization, isn't that so?" "I too shall be frank," Gredor Klon concedes. "That is true." "They wanted to find and kill you," Murdoch built another time ship. I helped him. I pretended to feel as they did. It wasn't difficult, for I wanted to find you for reasons of my own. Back in Albuquerque, I'd have been satisfied if you had returned me to my own time. But now, knowing what you intend, I want something more. I want to be a part of your kingdom, Gredor Klon." "I had thought of offering you that," the master murmurs, "but I did not need your aid." "Are you sure? My world is unfamiliar to you. You will not know where to strike, what countries and cities to attack, what shipping and trade routes to block. I know my own world, and with my help, the information I can give you, you'll be able to subdue your enemies more swiftly and more easily." "And you want—" "Rule. Rule of a nation under you, of course. I want power." The master stands up. I see. You are very clever, Kent Mason. But whether you are speaking the truth, I do not know. You may be in earnest, and you may be trying to trick me. Until I have reached a decision, therefore, you will remain a prisoner, but safe. He gestures. The beast man sees Mason, pulling him into the street. He makes no resistance. He has planted a seed in Gretterclon's mind, and now there is nothing to do but play the waiting game. He does not dare to bargain with the lives of Eliza and the others. This would have made the master instantaneously suspicious. The captors lead him into another rose marble building and down to vaults far below. In a bare stone room he is locked. A torch is set in the wall to give light. How long it will last, Mason does not know. The shaggy, hulking forms of the beast men lumber out of sight. Mason is left alone, captive, his mind haunted with fears for his friends. End of chapter 12.